Other censorships are not very visible, they're very subtle within the male-dominated institutions. So I was very frustrated at times, not knowing where to express what I really felt.
There is a self-censorship, there is surveillance, especially regarding visibility. And I would say that the internet has this problem also of access and skills. A lot of people cannot really get a voice on the internet, not only because of clear censorship, but because their voices are not followed, they're not considered interesting. The algorithms don't propose the narratives that they create.
I call it unfulfilled promises of the internet. It did not prove to be quote-unquote an egalitarian space which is open to everybody 24/7 all around the globe with the same degree of inclusion.
People finding community online, what does the community look like? How are they navigating these spaces offline as well? How are they finding care offline? Because like social media and Facebook isn't a neutral space. People try to say that it's not a neutral space. There's a lot of things that are at play. There's a lot of power structures that are at play as well. So what can the transnational solidarity look like? I think that
there has been for a long time an attempt to amend the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act of Sri Lanka. In fact, there was a very distinguished committee that was set up many years ago, which was multi-ethnic, which I thought was excellent. And I'm afraid much of the salutary provisions or recommendations of the amendments to the existing legislation were not followed through by the government.
Initiative. It's a wonderful initiative.
The Global South Network opened new horizons for judicial cooperation.
Global South Network provide a platform for meaningful dialogue and collaboration, fostering efforts to build a more equitable and resilient legal landscape.
GSN Network continues to expand areas of activity, further strengthening its impact and reach.
The universal concept of justice compels us to join our efforts, and this is, I believe, the forum for promoting the same goal.
Well deserved for the hectic activity you have made. I am astonished, I am amazed, I was impressed.
May I at the outset commend you, Dr. Ayad, for the immense work that you're doing in the GSN. The Global South Network is a much admired initiative.
كانت جزء لا يتجزأ من الدولة العثمانية.
We are being criticized for doing our job and for upholding the federal constitution. Like I have said in the past, I will not bend to such lame pressures and insinuations.
It's commendable. South Network focuses on all disciplines and regions, creating a bridge between academia, civil society, legal community, etc.
Quiero expresar mi sincero agradecimiento al Dr. Naumen Riad.
Dr. Naumen Riad, the founder and convener of the Global South Network. His visionary leadership has established a vibrant forum where judges, academics, and practitioners from around the world can share and exchange ideas. Initiatives like today's dialogue allow us to compare jurisprudence, share best practices, and develop common principles. This has the potential to contribute to transnational standards in procedure and enhance administrative law globally.
I would like to point out that Dr. Riad's initiatives have not only enriched comparative judicial dialogue, have also fostered mutual understanding of the diverse challenges that courts face in safeguarding the rule of law and constitutionalism.
We can rule when we want in the cases which are brought to us by citizens and residents In the EU, this openness of mind is increased by the fact we apply, in some cases, same norms from the EU treaties or the EU directives or regulations.
Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, it's late in the evening for me in Colombo, Sri Lanka. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the 6th seminar in Phase 5 of the International Interdisciplinary PhD in Progress weekly seminar series organized by the Global South Network. I believe I would speak for all of us when I extend my sincere appreciation to Dr. Nauman Rayat, lecturer in law at the Leicester Law School and founder and chief convener of the Global South Network, for organizing and leading this inspiring weekly series that continues to bring together scholars and practitioners from a multidisciplinary background, and for inviting me to chair tonight's session. I am Professor Nigel Hatch, and I'm a leading silk practicing at the Sri Lankan Bar. I'm a legal academic and lecturer, and have also been legal advisor to one of the former presidents of Sri Lanka, and I've had diplomatic assignments to the UN and India. It is my pleasure to chair today's Global South Network PhD in Progress session, and I look forward to learning about the presenter's research and engaging in the discussion that follows. We are joined tonight by two discussants and one peer commentator. The first discussant is Giulia Evolvi, who is a Marie Skłodowska Curie Fellow at the University of Bologna, Italy, where she conducts the project Media, Religion, and Gender on the topic of digital media, Catholic social movements, and gender. Giulia has obtained her PhD from the University of Colorado Boulder, USA, and has studied religious blogs, previously worked as a lecturer in media and communications at Erasmus University in Rotterdam, the Netherlands, and as a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Religious Studies at Ruhr University in Bochum, Germany, where she established a research area in religion and media. Welcome. The second discussant is Dr. Sahar Khamis, who is an associate professor of communication in the University of Maryland. She's the co-author of Islam.com in 2009 and Egyptian Revolution 2.0 2013, and co-editor of Arab Women's Activism and Socio-Political Transformation in 2018. In addition to publishing widely in English and Arabic, she has received several academic and professional awards and serves on multiple editorial boards in communication and media studies. Beyond academia, Dr. Khamis is a media commentator, public speaker, human rights commissioner in Montgomery, Maryland, and host of a monthly program on US Arab radio. Mojola Lawal is the peer commentator for tonight's session. She is a doctoral researcher at the Department of Media, Communications and Cultural Studies, Goldsmith, University of London. Her PhD research examines feminist digital activism, Twitter, and gender-based violence in Nigeria. Her mixed method research explores activist movements, both online and offline, alongside transformative justice methods and legal routes. She holds an LLM and LLB in human rights law from the School of Oriental and African Studies, University of London, and is permitted to practice as a solicitor in both England and Wales. Welcome to the two of you. Finally, it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for tonight's seminar, Shamila Yusuf Ali, who is a doctoral researcher in media and cultural studies at the Birmingham City University. Hailing from Sri Lanka, her work focuses on art, memory, and digital self-expression among Sri Lankan Muslim women. She's interested in how creative practices operate within contexts of surveillance, cultural policing, and political tension. Alongside her academic work, she's a journalist, writer, artist, and the founder of FemAsia magazine, a platform that amplifies Asian women's voices through literature, art, and critical reflection. Today, Shamila will present part of her PhD project titled Art, Memory, and Digital Resistance, Sri Lanka Muslim Women on Facebook. She will speak for approximately 30 to 35 minutes, followed by 5 to 10 minutes from each of the two commentators and peer commentator and discussants, I beg your pardon. If time permits, we will then open the floor for a 15-minute Q&A with the audience. Shamila, we are delighted to have you with us today, and please commence your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Nigel, for that warm introduction. Hello, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for the invitation. So today I'm going to present my ongoing PhD research titled Art, Memory and Digital Resistance, Sri Lankan Muslim Women on Facebook. So this is an ethnographic study that explores how Sri Lankan Muslim women use Facebook as a space for expression, negotiation, and visibility. Taking into mind in Sri Lanka, Muslims are a minority which consists 10% of the population. So I want to emphasize that this research is still in progress, and what I'm sharing today reflects emerging themes rather than final conclusions. Also, I have used my paintings, which I created throughout my PhD journey, in the slides as well. This project, my PhD, is very personal on one side as well as academic, because I'm a journalist, and as Professor Nigel said, I currently co-edit a magazine called SouthAsia, which publishes Asian women's voices. So before beginning my PhD, I was in Sri Lanka, my home country. So there I worked in media and journalism. So during that time, I encountered different forms of censorship. So I was editing a women's page in one magazine. And these censorships were sometimes institutional. Other censorships are not very visible. They're very subtle, they operate through editorial constraints and certain unspoken limited limits within the male-dominated institutions. So I was very frustrated at times, not knowing where to express what I really felt without being edited or going through several layers of scrutiny. So, and at that time, Facebook was becoming popular in Sri Lanka. So I began noticing that many women were turning to Facebook. They wrote poems, they shared their life stories, responded to certain social issues, and they shared certain things from their lives. So I noticed they were raw and unedited. And then I also started writing on Facebook. I began asking myself, what is happening in these digital spaces? Are these posts kind of simply personal posts, or do they have anything political behind it? So also, are they doing something more within the conditions of constraint? And also, is Facebook a contested place or an empowering place or a bit of both? So that question became the starting point for my PhD research. So this research examines how Sri Lankan Muslim women use Facebook to express themselves, and how they negotiate visibility, and how they respond to social and gendered expectations. So Sri Lankan Muslim women navigate layered social pressures. These include expectations around modesty, piety, community expectations, and also Islamophobia. So my central question is, how do women create space within these conditions of moral regulation? So visibility is often assumed to be empowering, but for minority women, visibility can also invite surveillance and scrutiny. So I approach visibility not as freedom, but as something which is negotiated. So the gap in the literature, when we examine digital activism scholarship, we often see emphasis on large protest movements and hashtag campaigns, and usually Western political context. And also they discuss about highly visible resistance. So these studies are important, there's no question about it. But at the same time, they tend to prioritize kind of spectacular moments, and less attention is paid to everyday creative expression and minority women in post-colonial societies, and also subtle negotiations of visibility within the community networks. So my research shifts attention from protest as spectacle to creativity as negotiation. Study is grounded in post-colonial feminism and intersectionality. Post-colonial feminism allows me to situate women's digital practices within histories of colonialism, nationalism, and ethno-religious tensions in Sri Lanka. So also intersectionality helps account for the layered positioning of Sri Lankan Muslim women as gendered and ethnic subjects. I approach Facebook not simply as a platform, but as a social space, which is shaped by colonial histories, ethno-religious politics, and also ongoing moral policing within their own communities. So digital space does not exist outside social structures. It reflects and reshapes them. So my research is guided by 3 questions. How does artivism enable expression and identity? What I mean by artivism is it's a blend of art and activism. So you do activism through writing, poetry, short stories, and stuff. And the second question is, how do women balance personal voice and collective expectations? And third one is, what issues do they face today? What are the contemporary problems? And how does their artivism respond to those issues or problems? So these questions allow me to examine the tension between constraint and creativity. Methodologically, I draw on narrative in-depth interviews, which I have 15 participants in my research. So with each one, I have conducted 2 to 3 hour in-depth conversations, one-to-one conversations. And then I have observed their Facebook profiles for the last 6 to 8 months. And what do they post? What do they delete? And, things like that. And then a feminist memory workshop, which is inspired by German feminist Frigga Haag. So this happened in Sri Lanka in person. Actually, I landed on Sri Lanka on November 27th, the same day, the cyclone struck Sri Lanka. So it was a very tough time. And within those 2 weeks, I couldn't do things as I planned, so that only 4 people could come to the workshop. Then I did the workshop online again last week. So, and then I also do reflexive journaling, because as an insider researcher, I maintain reflexive journaling to critically examine my own assumptions and positionality. And the memory workshop, which allowed access to their lived experience, beneath their visible post, because they're, as a group, they come together and talk about certain things. And, the interviews focus on how women experience posting, and what do they delete and why do they delete? What are the pressures they face within their own family and the outside? So from these data, the emerging themes, several themes are emerging. I have yet to begin my, analysis part, but still, you can see that a lot of themes are emerging. First is everyday artivism. So women engage in creative expression that is not always labeled as, activist or political, but it carries social significance. Second thing is moral policing and surveillance. Participants have described being monitored by family members and sometimes dictated by not to post certain things or, post photos of themselves and stuff. And sometimes they are monitored by extended networks, and there are community observers as well. And we know that screenshot culture, intensified this monitoring. And a third emerging theme is negotiated visibility. And women carefully consider their audience, the timing, wording, and tone when writing and publishing on Facebook. And then the fourth theme is self-censorship and caution, because, you can't express everything as it is. Sometimes you have to edit them. Certain topics are softened, coded, or avoided to maintain respectability and at times to avoid backlash from the community and the Facebook community. And also the fifth one is online solidarity. These women, despite surveillance, despite this monitoring, women describe networks of encouragement, especially through private messages and shared posts. Some of these women have got opportunities to publish their own book. Publishers have accessed them, and whatever they post, it reaches a huge audience as well. And these themes suggest that digital life operates within tension between surveillance and circulation. Yeah. So at this stage, as I said, these findings are preliminary and part of ongoing analysis. But one pattern that consistently appears is the strategic use of creative narration or poetry. This includes poetry, personal storytelling, maybe just a photo or a reflective post, and aesthetic framing of everyday experiences, like when you're cooking in the kitchen, you post about the food you cooked, or when you're tired, and then if you want a tea or coffee, and that is as a photo and then a few lines next to it. So these forms allow indirect critique, and it enable metaphor and emotional layering. So they create, I think they create a distance between speaker and the statement. So through Facebook, these creative expressions circulate beyond immediate surveillance networks. They reach wider audiences, including diasporic and transnational readers. So even when not framed as activism, I think the act of narrating, sharing, and being read shift visibility. It expands who is allowed to speak and how are they allowed to speak. I think it's very important. So I use the term digital activism to describe this negotiated creative practice. This is not a loud protest, but an everyday act of aesthetic negotiation within that contested space. So these women, including myself, I think we right to claim our own space. So this research invites us to rethink digital activism beyond protest-centered models. In post-colonial context shaped by layered moral regulation, resistance may not always be spectacular or a big thing. Sometimes it can be very careful, poetic, coded thing, and sometimes it's simply the refusal to disappear, to say that we are still here, I am still here. So thank you very much. I look forward to talk more and for your comments.
Thank you, Shamila, for that very interesting presentation. And may I commend your artwork? I'm an amateur artist myself, and I was looking very closely at the artwork that accompanied your slides. I now have great pleasure in inviting our first discussant, Dr. Giulia Evolvi from the University of Bologna. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So, well, first of all, I also wanted to start by complimenting your artwork because I think it's really important also for what you're trying to say. And I think your point is really clear and your work is important. I think that I would like to start from one of the last things you were saying, that the women's right to claim space. This is important, and I think the idea that digital activism is something that goes beyond organizing protests in the street or organizing petitions. I think this is one of the central points. There is literature working on that, but definitely we need more examples coming from post-colonial context or looking at minorities, such as the women, Muslim women in Sri Lanka. I would be curious to see some examples. I understand that your PhD is still ongoing. I would be curious to know more about some examples of what those women post. You described some of what they post, but it would be interesting to read a poem or see some artwork. So hopefully our paths will cross again when maybe your PhD is a bit more advanced and you will have some material to show. I have a couple of comments which kind of are questions, as often happens in academia. So perhaps those can be points of reflection for further discussion. The first one, you started with your personal experience, and thanks for sharing that, about being censored. And I understand you were talking about institutional censorship mostly, right? But then I think that your analysis is very nuanced in explaining how there is a censorship on Facebook as well. There is a self-censorship, there is surveillance, especially regarding visibility. And I would say that the internet has this problem also of access and skills. A lot of people cannot really get a voice on the internet, not only because of clear censorship, but because their voices are not followed, they're not considered interesting. The algorithms don't propose the narratives that they create. And in general, there could be backlashes and criticism. So I'm wondering what kind of difference you see in your work and also perhaps in your personal life between institutional censorship and the type of surveillance or backlashes that those women may experience on Facebook. And another interesting thing was the fact that you chose Facebook. I feel like in media studies, more and more people are moving towards exploring platforms such as TikTok because they're growing in popularity among the youngest generations. However, a lot of people are still on Facebook. And now through Meta, a lot of platforms are connected. For instance, some people tend to share the same content on Facebook and Instagram. And I'm wondering what kind of characteristic does Facebook have that sort of invite this kind of activism, and whether this actually gets spread also in other platforms on the internet and perhaps with different results. And finally, you defined Facebook as a space, and I really like this idea. I think as a social space you were discussing. And I'm also wondering how much those women are creating a type of space. There's a lot of reflections of scholars studying the internet and talking about the internet as, for instance, a third space, a counter-hegemonic space. And I do agree that the internet has this potential. But again, we have to consider the different backlashes that people can experience, and also what we mean when we talk about space. Even if it's not physical, what does it mean to be a space? Is this a community? Is this an exchange and a way for people to come together? So I don't want my intervention to be too long because I would really like to hear from others as well. But just to sum up, I think that this type of digital artivism, it's extremely interesting to explore and definitely can open up a lot of intersectional and interdisciplinary venues. But I definitely would be interested in seeing more connections between Facebook and other media outlets and other digital platforms, specifically for what regards the differences in censorship or self-censorship in Facebook and in other media expressions, and also the different characteristics between Facebook and other digital platforms such as Instagram or TikTok or Twitter, X. Also for what regards the possibility of creating a space. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Evolvi, for those very insightful comments. It is a great pleasure that I call upon our second discussant, Dr. Sahar Khamis, to please make her comments.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, Ramadan Kareem, Ramadan Mubarak. Okay, so Ramadan Mubarak, Shamila, I really liked your study a lot. Yeah, thank you. I really liked your study for a number of reasons. I'll start with a few words of praise, and I also have some suggestions for you for expanding on in your finished dissertation when it's completed, inshallah. So first of all, I really like the fact that the topic itself is very interesting, very timely. To Dr. Giulia's point, the fact that it's actually also touching upon a new ground. It's not just talking about the wide scale or large scale social and political movements, which has been pretty much the trend in the past, but talking about the individual and putting the individual at the center of all of this process, I think is extremely important. And that would be something I would like you to focus on in your finished dissertation, how you are filling some of these gaps in the previous literature. You did mention some of that in your presentation, but I think you are bringing a lot to the table that has not done before. I like the term artivism, which is different from the other terms that are widely used in that space, like, just activism or cyber activism or feminist activism. You are bringing a different angle and a different lens, which is artivism. I would definitely expand on the artivism part and explain why it is particularly important to discuss and to talk about, like, the bridge between the individual and the collective, the solidarity, right, the self-expression, all the beautiful things you mentioned in your presentation. I would definitely like to see that expanded upon and discussed even more in your finished dissertation. Also, the pros and cons of using digital space or the digital sphere for Muslim women, right? Definitely there are pros. You talked about some of that, like self-expression, the ability to express their identity, all of that, which is great. But there are also a lot of cons and a lot of challenges, especially now with the unfulfilled promises of the internet. I call it the unfulfilled promises of the internet. It did not prove to be, quote unquote, an egalitarian space, which is open to everybody 24/7 all around the globe with the same degree of, inclusion. There are a lot of barriers, and I would like you in your finished dissertation to expand on some of the challenges and the cons and the barriers which face Muslim women when they use the internet. And in fact, it's not just Muslim women, it's also what we call counter publics or marginalized groups at large. For example, there is now online profiling. There is doxing. You know what doxing is? When somebody, goes after you and tries to expose your identity, and even your private information can put you in harm's way. There is shadow banning. If the platform does not like what you are posting, they can pretty much constrain your circle of visibility and exposure and outreach. So instead of reaching, thousands of followers, you only reach hundreds of followers only, or even tens of followers only, right? That is something which is now unfortunately used in Twitter or X. So that is something you can also talk about. So certain threats and challenges which these digital spheres bring to the activism of Muslim women, like doxing and shadow banning and many others, and sometimes blocking, sometimes sabotaging, sometimes taking the content down, suspending platforms, and so on. So this discussion of pros and cons and opportunities and challenges, I think, is something that would be very valuable for you to expand on in your finished dissertation. I also want you to talk about the strength of using the ethnographic methodological approach in particular. Why does ethnography in particular really bring a big advantage for women in general and minority women, as in the case of Sri Lankan Muslim women, who are only 10% of the population, right? What is the value of using ethnography and the ethnographic approach in particular? What does it bring to the table? So that is something I would like you to expand on. I do like the fact that you used more than one data collection tool in your study. You used several things. You used journaling, you used workshop, you used interviews, and you used the analysis of the platforms. I would definitely introduce the term triangulation If you have not done so already, please talk about the term triangulation in your study of the methodology and the methodological approach, and explain how this triangulation of different data collection tools and techniques adds to the validity of your results. The main point, or the most important advantage of triangulation, is that you are able to compare and contrast the data that you collect across different data collection tools, and that boosts the validity of your own research results. So definitely expand on ethnography, why it's important, expand on these methodological tools, use the term triangulation, and also explain how it boosts the validity of your research results. I would replace the term observing Facebook posts with textual analysis of Facebook posts. Don't just say observing, because you were not just observing, obviously, what was there on the Facebook posts. You were doing more than that. You were analyzing what was there. So I would replace the word observing Facebook platforms or Facebook posts with a textual analysis of the content of these Facebook posts. That would be one of my suggestions and recommendations. I do like your discussion of self-reflexivity at the very beginning of the presentation, when you said why this topic is important for you, what does it bring to the table. I think that is great. In the finished dissertation, I would like you to expand on this theme of self-reflexivity, because that is something which is always very interesting for the readers. And I assume that once your excellent study is completed and finished, of course, you want to publish it. Probably publish it as a book, or maybe as a series of journal articles. That is pretty much up to you and your advisor to discuss and to decide on that. But in every case, the readers want to know what is the connection between the author and this completed and finished project. So I would definitely expand more on the self-reflexivity part of that altogether. Also, you talked about moral regulation, and my question would be, is it just moral regulation, or are there other types of regulation as well that these minority Muslim women are facing? In other words, being only a minority and 10% of the population, it is very possible that there are other types of regulation beside moral or social regulation. For example, political regulation, right? Digital regulation, the digital regulation, we talked about it when we talked about the, shadow banning and suspension and, doxing and all of that. But there is also possibly, I'm not very familiar with the Sri Lankan situation in particular, so I'm not the expert on Sri Lanka, you are, right? Is there any kind of political regulation as well? Would they face certain kinds of pressures, not just in the moral and social realm, but possibly also in the political realm and beyond? So you might wish to also touch upon these themes and expand on them a little bit more. I like the discussion of the negotiated visibility, negotiated identity, online solidarity, all of these terms, in my opinion, they do fill also some of the existing gaps in the literature. There aren't a lot of studies that talk about this element of negotiated visibility and identity and online solidarity. So again, these would be things I would like you to expand on when you talk about how your study adds to the literature and how it fills some of the gaps in the existing literature. I would definitely ask you to expand more on these very important themes, because they add to the value of your own study in so many ways. Also, for the, how they claim space, I wrote here, they bring about and they build bridges between the social and the political, between the individual and the collective, between the local and the international or the global, and between the online and the offline. So I love your identity of claiming space. I would like to see you expand more on this theme and talk about it more in your finished dissertation, and talk about how they are bridging also these different spaces and these different areas together. That would be very interesting, because that is one of the things that the digital sphere brings to these Muslim women, the ability to go beyond their local community to an international global audience, and also beyond the individual self-expression to a more collective kind of self-expression. So please talk more about claiming space and bridging all of these different gaps. For the theoretical part, usage of the post-colonial intersectional feminism, I think you are using the correct theoretical lens and theoretical framework here. I would like to see further discussion and more in-depth discussion of this particular theoretical lens, why you particularly chose to focus on post-colonial intersectional feminism, what does it bring to the table, what are the theoretical premises of this model, why it fits your particular study, and why does it add to this particular type of research. So that, again, more expansion on that would be great. The fact that you are moving from the large-scale spectacle social movements, as Dr. Giulia said at the beginning of her intervention and comments, to the more individualized part is also another very important point. I would definitely like you to expand on this and emphasize it as one of the values of your own research. And finally, there are some studies I have done lately that I would like you to look at. There's an article called It's Bisan from Gaza, and I'm Still Alive. I can share, of course, these articles with you happily by email. That one in particular would be very relevant to your work because it does talk about how Palestinian activist women are using social media, digital media spaces to express their identities, their collective self-expression, and also the theme of resistance, which you very rightly brought in your study, and I think it's a great theme. So in that case, these Palestinian digital activists are really claiming their feminist, social, political forms of resistance using digital media. So that's an article I would like you to look at. Also, in their own voice, technologically mediated empowerment, which I co-authored in Feminist Media Studies. That is an article also that talks about women's self-expression and usage of new technological tools. And finally, unveiling the pros and pro-hijab, unveiling pro-hijab and anti-hijab activism on TikTok, which I co-authored in 2025. That is about Muslim women's different forms of expression and activism online. That was published in 2025. These are three articles I think would be very useful for you to look at, and I'll be more than happy to share them with you by email. And once your dissertation is completed, I would love the opportunity to co-author with you. I think you'll be an excellent scholar, and I congratulate you already on an excellent project. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khamis, for a very comprehensive and insightful set of comments. It is with pleasure that I now call upon Mojola Lawal, who's our peer commentator, to please share her viewpoint with us.
Hi, I just have like a little to add. I feel like Dr. Khamis and Dr. Giulia said a lot that I would have said. One of the first things I pointed was about Facebook as a space, because my research focuses on Twitter. And I know that, like Dr. Khamis said, about all the restrictions that aren't only just political, but also the restrictions that come as Facebook as a space. So censorship, how they like remove posts, what it means when they delete posts, and who has access to the spaces, who has access to running internet, and what type of communities are left out of these conversations when they aren't only online, when they're also offline. So I think it's also important to look at the transnational solidarity that also comes from these things. People finding community online, what does the community look like? How are they navigating these spaces offline as well? How are they finding care offline? Because like social media and Facebook isn't a neutral space. People try to say that it's not a neutral space. There's a lot of things that are at play. There's a lot of power structures that are at play as well. So what can the transnational solidarity look like? I think that would be something to build upon, especially within local and international solidarity as well. How are international audiences relaying and helping with these movements in a local level? I also look at what else did I look at? The explanatory triangulation of difference. Yeah, local, offline, and online. I think, yeah, that's all I have to say. The transnational solidarity. Everything else has been said.
Thank you very much, Mojola. Now, the floor is open for, I hope, a very interactive and entertaining Q&A session. And participants who are with us tonight or this evening are free to make any comment or intervention.
Thanks. Good to have Munas working for UNICEF in Ukraine. My background is education, especially the education in emergency. I'm aware of Shamila's work. My point of start with an appreciation of her work and the tireless and the commitment she has been investing. In the context of Sri Lanka and the women participations, empowering them is highly limited. I also come with the same background of the community. This work, especially when these new media came into existence, a lot of women, especially from the Muslims cohort sides, is using excellently to create the social spaces and to empower them and to be part of community development as also broadly the a nation building. My wishes to have that's my point here. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the invitation, Shamila.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Are there any more comments? Sorry.
There was a thank you very much for all those insightful comments earlier on. And I would like to, Giulia asked me 3 questions. At least I think I should answer one. Taking the time into account. So she asked me why it's Facebook, not TikTok or Instagram. So in Sri Lanka, Facebook is still widely used. So my participants are between the age group of 25 to 60. So most of them still use Facebook, which was the first, I think, introduced social media in Sri Lanka, and it's still popular. And Instagram and TikTok are popular too. But in the Facebook, you have this storytelling, story writing space. You have you can write a longer post on Facebook rather than in Instagram or TikTok. It's like mostly videos. So that's why I chose Facebook rather than Twitter or X or Instagram or anything else. And all these interviews are done in Tamil, which is my mother tongue as well. So, the technological issues of transcribing Tamil to, Tamil writing and then to translate it to English. It is taking a lot of time, and there's no, proper tools to transcribe and translate. And you had to think about the confidentiality and stuff. You can't just use AI to do those things. And that's really been a challenge. Otherwise, I would have shared some poetry and whatever they have expressed. Yes, and also I acknowledge that Facebook is not a fully empowered free space. It's a contested space. Algorithms function, and then especially the people I have chosen for my research, they are not celebrities, but still they have a huge fan following as because of their writings. They're not branded as celebrities or mini celebrities. Yes, and thank you very much. I would include all your inputs into my research, and thank you, Sahar, for all those comments, and I would really like to work with you in future. Thank you.
I'm going to use my prerogative as chairman, Shamila, being a co-Sri Lankan. I found the topic very fascinating, and clearly your research is perhaps pioneering in that. My understanding is that in this area, there's not much research on the aspirations of Muslim women in Sri Lanka, given the moral surveillance and or policing. In fact, your preceding comment answered one of my questions as to what language much of these posts were made in, and you said it was in the Tamil language. You also referred to the strategic use of poetry, and I think it was Dr. Giulia who did suggest that perhaps you should have access or give access to what some of this poetry is. But what I would like to ask you is, what areas do the lady subjects come from? Are they mostly urban? Are they rural?
Thank you, Professor Nigel, for that question. So I have purposefully chosen women from different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. So they belong to eastern part of Sri Lanka, and then Colombo, Kandy, different parts of Sri Lanka, Puttalam, and so I have tried to represent different backgrounds, and then economic situations as well, and educational backgrounds. So I have tried to accommodate that, and the interviews are done in Tamil, and the writings are what they post is like purely in Tamil. So so the people who read is also like who can speak Tamil. So like Tamil is spoken in it is the oldest living language at the moment in the world. It dates back to 2000 years. And then Tamil is spoken in several parts of South India, and then Singapore, Malaysia and stuff. So, the writings, whatever they write, that they reach a wider audience. And some people have got book contracts through this Facebook. Otherwise, nobody would have known them. Like, it would have, yeah.
You did refer to the fact that this is a digital resistance in the wider context of self-expression, policed by what you refer to as layered social pressure. Now, may I ask, to contextualize it to our colleagues who are from a non-Sri Lankan context, there has been for a long time an attempt to amend the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act of Sri Lanka. In fact, there was a very distinguished committee that was set up many years ago, which was multi-ethnic, which I thought was excellent. And I'm afraid much of the salutary provisions or recommendations of the amendments to the existing legislation were not followed through by the government of the day. And in fact, another member of parliament has presented a private member's bill, or is in the process of presenting a private member's bill, have amendments to the Muslim Marriage and Divorce Act or any other legislation which is found to be restrictive being part of their activism or their comment.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, that is, they have written about needing this, transformation. And, when you're reforming an act, who should lead that? Is it women or men from other communities? That was the question behind it. And they also talk about, hijab ban. There was a burqa ban during the COVID times.
Yes.
So then there was a famous Easter Sunday attacks. Following that, Muslim women were controlled, and whatever, hijab, burqa was banned, and then in certain hospitals and schools even the hijab was banned. So at that time, these women, through their poetry and to their creative writing, they talked about that. And that was kind of a protest, I think, because when you openly go on the street and protest, you can be sent into jail sometimes. So that was a time. So yeah, they were talking about, I think, anything and everything which affects a Sri Lankan Muslim community.
So would you by and large say that much of the posts are emancipatory? They're seeking emancipation, if I may use that term?
I don't think I would not agree with that term. So some people, they don't even know that they are protesting through their writing. It's just expressing their feelings, and then it becomes a form of protest. So that's what I see.
Right.
There's a question, Mojola has a question.
Yes, of course. Please go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to also ask about because I deal with ethics. I had a lot of ethics issues from using social media as a form of research. So I wanted to know if you had any ethics issues with using Facebook and going into these groups and finding these women that you were going to interview.
Of course, I had, since these women were spoke the same language I spoke, and I was part of their community. This was made easier, but I had to fill lots of forms for ethics committee to get it approved, and who is going to translate this, in what setting I'm going to talk to them, and are they going to appear with their videos or just the voice, all these things. So I had to think about all this, which also helped me to frame things. I think the ethical, setup exists for our safety as well. And also the participant safety. So it was kind of tough, but I got through it.
I think we have at least another 5 minutes. Are there any more comments or questions from the participants this evening?
Prof Nigel, for your questions related to the legal provisions for and against the marriage, being an observer in the Sri Lankan context, I can reflect 2 points. One is the resistance or support happen both at the personal level. There are female wanted to go for the change, and there are no against the reforms conversations. The second one is some of them are happening at the personal level, but there is also at the community level, mobilizing the forces and coming to as a resisting force, and that's needed support to get this parliament get through for a legitimate. There are 2 groups really came. There was 2 reforms came where didn't go well due to some other religious reason and the political reasons. On other questions, writing in Tamil and through literature, even Shamila herself, I have read her poem in Tamil and supporting these reforms, and mainly who has to drive the reforms. It is female affected themselves, not someone else, outsiders. So that's not going to be, the change should happen within, not outside for any political reasons. And even one of her posts was picked up by the previous Justice Minister of Sri Lanka, Rauf Hakim, saying that her research would help him to reframe this debate in the parliament, to participate for the change. So that is also a good sign of her work reaching at the policy level change and policymakers to get her work done, and also to use her work in support of the changes. Thanks.
Thank you.
Please go
Just
ahead.
a very quick comment. I just wrote in the chat maybe the term empowerment instead of the term emancipation, because usually emancipation is perceived within the quote-unquote Western notions of feminism, right? And I would like Shamila in her completed dissertation to talk about also indigenous forms of feminisms with a plural S and activisms with a plural S, which do not always necessarily fit within the rhetoric of Western feminism, which includes terms like liberation and emancipation. So maybe the term empowerment would be a better term to use. And to Mona's point, indigenous empowerment as well, which is coming from these women within their own indigenous culture and indigenous identities. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sahar, Khamis. Yes, it's a good way to present empowerment. Lately, I'm a research student. I was thinking transformative empowerment that should come within. It's not outside. So I would prefer to look at transformative empowerment. Thanks.
Thank you.
I assume that there are no further comments. So again, Shamila, for your insightful and stimulating presentation, which from a Sri Lankan context, I'm sure would open more avenues for further reflection and discussion, not only within the Muslim community, but within our multi-ethnic and plural society as well. My heartfelt thanks goes to our excellent discussants, Dr. Evolvi and Dr. Khamis, and of course, our peer commentator, Mojola, for their thoughtful and engaging feedback. I wish to say something about the Global South Network, who is our host tonight. It warmly welcomes PhD students from all disciplines, and it's a multidisciplinary approach, and from every corner of the world, to share their research and receive interdisciplinary feedback. If you're interested in presenting your work, please get in touch with Dr. Nauman Riyad, the founder and convener of the Global South Network, at his email address shared in the chat box. Goodbye, everyone, and thank you once again for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you
very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for the invitation.
Thank you.
And best of luck with your PhD.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Best of luck. Thank you so much.